I feel like building a house is the most quintessentially Minecraft thing imaginable. It ranks right up there with survive the first night, find diamonds, and aw man. Sooner or later, everyone who plays Minecraft builds a house. But let's be realistic here for a moment. Art is dead. No one cares about creativity or imagination. People just want more. More houses. So today I've used commands to make a randomly generating house, thus effectively creating some number of houses. I haven't calculated it yet, but I'll put it on the screen here so you can see. Okay, I suppose we should probably get started with the obvious, which is just sort of showing you guys the house, because I'd imagine that's what you all came here to see. So, boom, we can see it loads in rather slowly, and we got a house. You know, it has a door, it has an interesting floor, it's nice and tall. Here's another one, once again, you know, it's got a door, maybe this one will have a window, nah. And so, you know, we can make as many of these as we would like to, and they're of all different shapes, they're of all different sizes, some of them have windows in rather strange positions. So yeah, you know, I feel like that's what you came here to see. So congratulations, you got to see the nice little randomly generating house. Now oh god, I'm wearing my egg skin again. I'm sorry. Anyway, back to the point at hand. You're sitting here like, yeah, you know, that's moderately cool. We can get some different houses. That's nice. But Henry Cat, I waited a whole week for this episode. I mean, like, the houses aren't even that perfect. They're not that complex. Well, here is what I have to say to you guys. These are the command blocks that are powering this whole contraption. I don't know how many commands there are, because I don't want to count, but it's a lot of commands. So I suppose without further ado, let's get right into the long and hopefully not too tedious explanation. So I think we have to start our tour at this little pillar of command blocks that I just made to test something out. So basically, right now there is no good way to generate random numbers in Minecraft. The best way is to sort of make a random number generator yourself, and we do that through what is called a linear congruential number generator, I believe. I might be completely misremembering the name, but I think that's what it's called. Wikipedia has a great article about it, which is what I read to learn about them for this project. I would highly recommend you go read that. Actually, scratch that. I would not recommend reading that because it's a little bit tedious, and I'm about to explain it to you anyway. Effectively, what it does is it takes a number, right? And it does a bunch of calculations to that number. Specifically, it does multiplication, addition, and modular division. So then, it takes the result of all those calculations, and it spits that out as a random number, right? And you can use that random number for whatever you want. And then, after that, when you want a new random number, it takes the result of the last calculations, and it plugs it into a new set of calculations, giving you another quote-unquote random number. So yeah, it's not technically random, because it does follow a pattern, but that pattern is really hard to detect. And at the end of the day, it ends up looking like random numbers. So here you can see I've generated 4 random numbers, and I can do that again and again, and they will be all seemingly unrelated, even though in reality each one comes from the last. So I just want to get that out of the way right off the bat, because we do use a lot of random numbers in this for, you know, obvious reasons. So another thing I really want to get out of the way really quickly, this one should be a little bit simpler, honestly, and a little bit more Minecraft related, which I think is good. I don't know if you know this, but houses are actually made out of blocks, right? And as part of the randomness, I wanted to randomize the blocks that the house is made out of. So what we have over here is 4 sets of sort of block palettes. The last one is actually hidden under here. So basically I have a set of blocks that I use for the walls, a set of blocks that I use for the floor, a set that I use for the roof, and a set of doors as well. So what we do is we use the spread players command to move each armor stand to a random location on its square. And then we clone the block or blocks beneath it to just a random set position over here. I realize I just said random and set like they were the same thing when they're kind of opposite. What I mean is the position itself isn't important. That's what I mean by random. But it's always the same position. And then whenever we need to use a block in the house, what we can do is clone from this block here. So if I were to, instead of having this be quartz, if it were to be just randomly a grass block, then we would have a house made out of grass blocks, because the grass block would get cloned over there repeatedly. So yeah, I would say those are two of the most important things to understand about this house. Just the way that we generate random numbers and the way that we generate random blocks. So that really only leaves how we use those random numbers to create a random house. And unfortunately, that's where things get a little bit more complicated. So here on our sidebar, you can see we have a whole host of different scoreboards that are being used to generate this house. 3 of the first numbers that we generate are Z main, X main, and Y main. Those 3 numbers, X main, Z main, and Y main, are the shape of the original cube. Now, what do I mean by the original cube? Well, I've sort of broken one of the command blocks up somewhere over there, so production will stop early, and what we get is we can see we have a cube of armor stands here. So this cube has a length in this direction equal to, I guess, X main, a length in this direction equal to Z main, and a height equal to Y main. Well, how do we accomplish that? Well, here's what we do. First of all, we summon one armor stand called cube point, right? And it's summoned at 0, 22, 0. And what happens to it is it will check if X main is greater than 1. And if it is, then it'll summon a new armor stand at it called cube edge. And then it will teleport forward 1 in the X direction, and then it will reduce X main by 1. So it does that several times, so that by the time we're done with this first row of command blocks, we have a row of armor stands, all tagged with cube edge, equal in length to X main. Now we take each of the cube edge armor stands and do the same thing with them, but with Z main instead. So they will teleport forward in the Z main direction if Z main is greater than 1, and summon armor stands at them called cube face. So at the end of that, we have sort of a plane of armor stands equal in length to X main and equal in width to Z main. Now, finally, as you can probably guess, we do the same thing with all of the cube face armor stands. So instead of going sideways, though, they just go up and summon things tagged as cube, because I thought, point, edge, face, cube, but then I was already using the word cube in there, so yeah, you get the picture. So at this point, we have set up a cube of armor stands, which is making my game lag really hard because it's kind of big, but I'm sure you get the idea. It's a cube of armor stands. But that wasn't quite complex enough to me, because that was just producing these really boxy houses. And I mean, yeah, houses are boxes, but they shouldn't be like just one box. So what I decided to do instead was to actually make 2 boxes. The second box that I make functions very similarly to the first one. The only difference is that instead of summoning the first armor stand at 0, 0, we generate a new set of random numbers. This time, I should probably cover how we sort of limit the random numbers, because as you may recall, when we were using just that little pillar over there to generate some random numbers, like they were like 30,000, we don't want a 30,000 block wide tower. So what we do actually instead is we use some more modulus division. So effectively what that will do is it will divide, in this case, tower Z by tower range Z, and take the remainder of that. And the remainder will be a number from 0 through tower range Z. Now, what is tower range Z? Well, actually, it's just equal to Z main, which is the sort of width in the Z direction of the first cube. I originally had been trying to do things a little bit differently and add some extra numbers to that to sort of give the tower some more range, but it wasn't working. And ultimately I ended up just setting tower range z equal to z main. So that ended up being pointless. But anyway, yeah, so what we're doing is we're generating two new random numbers, tower z and tower x, and we are putting them somewhere in the range from 0 to z or x main. And then we set the position of the armor stand from tower x and tower z. And that ensures that the start of the tower is inside the original cube. Once we do that, we just do exactly the same thing we did before. We just generate basically a new box by recursively summoning armor stands and teleporting them forward. So, you might be wondering, what exactly is the merit to having this massive field of armor stands? Like, why would you not just fill the area? Well, actually having that many armor stands is extremely helpful, because it sort of allows us to check conditions about every single block. So first what I do is I clone the wall block onto every single armor stand. And so we would have just a solid box of, some kind of wood or quartz or whatever it is down there. Then what we can do, and this is sort of where the magic happens, is we can take every single armor stand and have it check if the blocks around it are air. And if none of them are air, then it can turn itself into air, if that makes sense. So like, as a quick example of why that would work, imagine we want to just make this cube hollow, right? So what we would do in the case of our box, really, is we would have it check if all the blocks around it are air, and every single block has at least one block of air around it, except for the one in the very middle. So the one in the very middle would turn into air, and the rest would stay put, and thus we would have a hollow cube. After we do that, to set up the floor, what we do is we take every single armor stand, once again, and check if the block beneath it is made of grass. And if it is, then it will clone the floor block that we have selected beneath it. And so now we're getting into the roof. And the roof is easily the most finicky and frustrating part about this all. I spent a really long time on the roof, and it's still mildly buggy. I'm really not sure why. It seems like it should be working okay, but it's not, and I've kind of accepted that to some degree. Anyway, so I'm probably gonna flail around with this explanation a bit. There's a solid chance that none of what I'm saying will make any sense, but here's the good news. You don't have to worry about whether or not you understand it, because you don't have to actually make it. So, once again, we pick out our materials like we always do. This time there are 3, because we need a stair that's facing this way, a stair that's facing that way, and a slab for the very top of the roof. So basically what happens to start off is we summon another set of armor stands at the very top of the house. And what each of these armor stands do is they basically check a bunch of conditions, use those conditions to determine what they should do to the block above them, and then teleport upwards and repeat until the roof is completed. So specifically, the things they check are what are the blocks to either side of them. So say you were an armor stand sitting in this block here. What you would want to check is you would say, okay, is the block to this side, is it air, or is it sort of the main wall block? And it's the main wall block, and so then you would check on the other side, and you would say, okay, over here though, it's air. And so that would mean you would want a stair facing this way. Over here, the reverse is true, of course. On the left side, we have a block that is sort of the main wall block, and then on the right, we have a block that is not the main wall block, and so we want a stair facing this way. All the middle ones have the main wall block on both sides, so that means they want a solid block above them. And then if we get up to the very top, say we're in this middle spot here, you would check left is not the main wall block, right is also not the main wall block, so you want a slab above you. The part where it actually gets difficult, and rather buggy in fact, is I have an absurd desire to be extra detailed. And so what that means is I wanted this little overhang, right? Like right now what we had is it would be just like this. And I gotta be honest, that does not look good. I really wanted to get this overhang, because that really, in my mind, that just improves the quality of the house build so much. Basically, what I had to do was first of all, I had to check at each armor stand, does the block above it match the sort of basic wall block? Because if it does, I don't actually want to clone it, because then we would be cloning the solid blocks too. So yeah, anyway, it checks if that's the case. It also checks if the block above it and next to it in the direction that it's trying to clone is air, and if it is, then it clones the block. So yeah, long story short, that seems like it should work, and it seems like 9 times out of 10 it does, but occasionally, I don't know, I'll try to see if I can find an example of it not working. Oh, here we go. It seems like oftentimes when you have sort of 2 sets of things that are both right next to each other, you know, I don't know why, but this overhang is 2 long instead of just 1 long. Not sure why it decided to do that, but, you know, there it is. And now it's the moment that we've all been dreading, windows. Here's the reason that I have been dreading explaining the windows. I did kind of a terrible job with them. I had some brilliant and complex plan of how I was going to set them up, and then I ran out of time, mostly, and also it wasn't working. But whatever. Basically what it involves is it involves a lot more random numbers than it really needs to. So, in summary, we generate a total of, I believe, 7 random numbers. Random number 1 is window count. What window count was going to do was determine how many windows we actually summon. But like I said, I sort of ran out of time, and yeah. So at the moment, at least, window count does nothing. Number 2, window direction. Window direction determines which wall the window appears on. Number 3, window height determines how tall the window is. Number 4, window width determines, you guessed it, how wide the window is. Window X determines the X position of the window, window Y determines the Y position of the window, and window Z determines what color the stained glass is. So, with our 1.5 million random numbers explained, what happens, in short, is a whole bunch of baloney. So yeah, that little bit of this house is probably the most complicated, but also the least successful. Okay, so that leaves, last but not least, the door. So the way that the position of the door is determined is a little bit complicated, but unlike with the window, I think it's actually necessarily complicated. Like, it's a good thing that it's this complicated. Rather than just selecting an entirely random position for the door, I wanted the door to be somewhat centered. So you can see in here, it's centered on this little outcropping. And if there's no outcropping, well, it's not actually that centered, and I'll get into that as well. So the thing about the door is we need to do different things based on the position of the sort of secondary cube. Because if the secondary cube is kind of far back, we want the door to be centered as well as we can on the primary cube, or the first cube. If, however, like we have here, the secondary cube is farther forward, we want the door to be centered as best as we can on that secondary cube. So the way we check that is with a scoreboard objective called door check. So what we do is we set door check to be equal to the width of the secondary cube divided by 2 plus the x position of the cube. So that ideally door check is equal to the position of sort of the front wall of the secondary cube. Then what we can do is we can say if door check is less than 0, then we want the door to be centered on the secondary cube, and if it's greater than 0, then we want it to be centered on the main cube. The way we do the centering is we just take the widths of either cube, whichever it is, and divide it by 2, and in the case of the secondary cube, we add the z value of the x cube. then all we have to do is summon an armor stand a little bit down that way and teleport it forward until the block it's on is no longer air, and then it clones that door onto the house, and we are finished. Well, not quite. I still feel the need to point out that this door is not quite centered. I don't know why that is. It's not because of the door. It's because, for some reason, the value of x main, or rather z main, is not equal to the z width of the cube. I don't know quite what went on there. I guess I must have messed something up. But I don't really know why it's doing that. And now with that, I think we can say we are actually done. I really hope you guys have enjoyed this video. I kind of doubt you did, because it really was just a long explanation, and I find that the explanations are usually the most boring parts of my other videos. But yeah, regardless, I'll see you guys soon. Bye.